We used to be number one. Now, Canada is doing it without even trying. If you ever thought the US was the brightest star on the global travel map, then 2025 might make you chuckle a little, or worry a little. Because, while Americans are still debating which city is the most livable in their own country, the rest of the world, and Americans themselves, are quietly rolling their suitcases toward the neighbor. Canada isn't flashy, isn't loud, but it's winning big with kindness and surprisingly low prices. And the most interesting part? Americans aren't leaving America out of hatred. They're searching for the very things America once stood for: safety, ease of living, and a smile that doesn't come with a bill. American tourism isn't dead, but it's being quietly unfollowed by its closest friends. So, what's really going on when the neighbor becomes the dream destination? There's a running joke in the North American travel community. If you can't live like a happy American, try being a happy tourist in Canada. It sounds lighthearted and witty, but behind that humor lies a reality that's making many Americans raise an eyebrow and book a flight. Canada, the longtime neighbor, is no longer just the place to escape the summer heat or watch the autumn leaves. In 2025, the country known for maple syrup and hockey officially surpassed the U.S. in international tourist arrivals, something once unimaginable yet perfectly logical if you take a closer look. Because something has changed. Without making noise or fighting for attention, Canada simply chose to live kindly. And that alone is enough for the world to lean in their direction. The U.S. used to be the main stage of global tourism, the place everyone dreamed of touching the Statue of Liberty, strolling under the lights of Times Square, or screaming with joy at Disneyland. But over time, that dream has grown more expensive, more stressful, and layered with countless checks, from visas to security to suspicious glances at the airport. Meanwhile, just north, Canada welcomes you with a polite smile, transparent policies, and an experience that doesn't make you feel like you have to prove yourself just to relax. That's where the difference lies. One side says, "Show me you qualify." The other says, "Come in and feel at home." If travel is an invitation, Canada is writing a handwritten note, while America sends out a 3-step online form. Toronto doesn't have the extravagant water shows like Las Vegas, but you won't need 5 different apps to check hotel prices. Vancouver doesn't have Hollywood, but you can walk the seawall at 11 p.m. without looking over your shoulder. And most notably, no one tries to sell you travel insurance every 5 minutes. Why is this shift happening? Maybe because the world is exhausted from places where you constantly have to prove your worth. Travelers are no longer chasing surreal wonders. They want real kindness. They don't need another check-in photo. They want peace of mind. And Canada understands that without needing loud slogans. Even Americans, famously patriotic, are starting to choose Canada for their vacations. Not because they hate America, but because in Canada they can breathe. Couples from Arizona choose Ontario to escape the heat and the skyrocketing car rental fees. Retirees from Minnesota buy small homes in Nova Scotia simply because the hospital is closer and the coffee is cheaper. The world doesn't hate America, but it's growing tired of a version of America that's tense, expensive, and rarely listens. Meanwhile, Canada, long described as the quiet friend at the table who always shares their snacks, is suddenly the one getting all the weekend invites. Maybe it's time Americans looked inward. If the whole world and our own people are picking Canada over New York or Miami, perhaps the question isn't what's wrong with them, but what's happened to us. Because, in the end, the destination we choose doesn't reflect the landscape or the service. It reflects how we feel we'll be treated. And right now, people are choosing the place with more smiles over slogans. Canada didn't plan to become the world's #1 travel spot. They just simply chose not to scare people. And in today's world, that's enough to beat America's entire dream-making industry. When Americans quietly step outside. If the usual question used to be, "Where are you going this summer?" Americans are now starting to ask each other, "Do you still want to stay?" Not because they hate America, but because they're slowly realizing that to live more gently, they don't necessarily have to carry the weight of their homeland's high-pressure rhythm. And so, Americans, those who once believed the world would come to them, are now quietly stepping away. It's not a dramatic wave of migration. It's more like a gentle breeze crossing the border, carrying along suitcases, pets, espresso machines, and the dream of a life with easier breathing. In recent years, terms like expat life, digital nomad, or retire abroad have become daily headlines in Facebook groups, Reddit forums, and morning coffee chats in American towns. They're not loud, they're not in the news, they're not making political arguments. They're just quietly leaving. And the interesting thing is, many don't even say goodbye. A widowed woman in Oregon, after recalculating her retirement and hospital costs, simply sent an email to her daughter. "I'm going to try living in Portugal for 6 months. I heard the coffee's cheap there, and the doctors ask how you are before checking your insurance card." Then there's a couple in Texas who once dreamed of retiring in sunny Florida. But with current housing prices, they decided to pivot. If we have to sell the house anyway, why not sell it to live near the beach, just south of the border? And so they chose Lake Chapala, Mexico, where the mornings bring sunshine, the afternoons bring tequila, and the evenings bring friends who don't ask what you do, but whether you're hungry. The story of Americans leaving their homeland isn't a tragedy. It's more like a personal journey of awakening. They realize that patriotism doesn't have to mean enduring. And seeking a more decent life, sometimes, is an act of loving oneself and the country. Because no one understands the emotional expense of America better than Americans themselves. You can live in New York, earn 6 figures, and still feel you're paying with loneliness. You can move to a peaceful suburb and still panic every time a healthcare bill arrives. And at some point you ask, if I have to live with a cheaper version of America, why not choose one that's truly less stressful? The important thing is, through all of this, Americans aren't losing themselves. They're just taking the best parts of American culture and bringing them elsewhere. They still drink Starbucks, bought at the airport, still say, "Have a nice day," still wear baseball caps, still watch Netflix with Spanish subtitles. But now, they're living among strangers who somehow feel closer than old neighbors. And the most surprising part? In these places, from the Algarve coast in Portugal to the ancient town of Hoi An in Vietnam, people don't just accept Americans, they learn from them. Not because they're American, but because they arrive with openness, lightness, and gratitude. So instead of viewing this quiet departure as failure, maybe we should see it as a signal that Americans aren't giving up. They're rediscovering what it feels like to live, not just exist between deadlines and stacked bills. The world is changing, and Americans, instead of resisting, are learning how to walk with it, gently but deeply. Because for perhaps the first time in decades, Americans are traveling not to see the world, but to see themselves. And the most beautiful thing is that at the end of that journey, maybe they'll return. But this time, with eyes that have seen something America may need to relearn. Kindness doesn't have to be loud. Mexico, where Americans feel human again. If you ask a Southern-born American whether they've ever thought about living abroad, the usual answer used to be, "I've never left my own state." But in 2025, things are different. The dream of retiring in Florida has gradually turned into a dream of truly resting by a Mexican lake, where Americans don't have to count every penny just to keep a bit of peace at the end of life. Mexico. It might seem like a risky choice if you only listen to U.S. media, but for those who've stepped foot there, they're not talking about danger, but sunny mornings, $1 tacos, and someone asking, "Are you okay?" instead of, "Do you have enough money?" From suspicious image to lovable destination. There's an irony. The U.S. once built a wall to keep danger on the other side of the border. But now, Americans themselves are crossing, with legal passports, to find the safety they no longer feel in their own country. And they're not going to improve Mexico. They're going to breathe, to live, to dine seaside for the price of lunch at a California mall. In cities like Mérida, San Miguel de Allende, even Sayulita, small towns once only on backpacker maps, they're now Little Arizona, New Portland, or Seattle but sunny. It's not Mexico that changed, it's Americans who have changed. They started to look closer and realized a one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles could equal a mini villa with a housekeeper in Guadalajara. One uninsured doctor visit in New York could equal 3 months of holistic health care at an Oaxaca clinic. And the biggest surprise? No one treats you like a wallet to pick. They treat you as a guest, properly. Stories from those who went first. Susan, 68, a nurse from Houston. After retiring, she discovered that her health insurance didn't cover her routine diabetes checkups. She tried Lake Chapala, home to an American retiree community since the 90s. "I intended to stay 3 months," she said. 11 years later, I still don't want to leave. There she can enjoy fresh juice at breakfast, join community yoga, speak broken Spanish, and, most importantly, have neighbors who check on her for no reason. Then there's the Mitchell couple from California, once planning to downsize within the U.S., but ended up downsizing geography, not dreams. They sold their house and moved to the beaches of Tulum, where the sun, waves, coconuts, and a vegetarian restaurant called La Paz became their second home. In America, we work to live. Here, we live without having to work so much. When security isn't guns and cameras, Americans go to Mexico not because of the scenery, though the Caribbean beaches are filter-free beautiful. They go because they feel not being watched. In the U.S., a man walking at night might be stopped by police for looking suspicious. In Mexico, you only get stopped if you're carrying something that smells good and they want to ask where you got it. In America, security is an industry. In Mexico, security is a vibe. Smile to live. Not just live to smile. Mexicans have a special ability. They smile even when talking about serious things. Not because they take things lightly, but because they choose a life that's not made heavy. And for Americans, long used to automated calls from banks, piled-up bills, and health alerts, that smile is a strange but addictive gift. So don't be surprised if you hear an American at the airport say, "I went to Mexico to rest, but ended up finding myself." Because there, no one asks where you went to college, what stocks you're invested in, or how many followers you have. They just ask, "Did you eat lunch yet?" And sometimes that's enough to make you feel human. Mexico doesn't try to replace the U.S. It's simply living as itself. And Americans, on their journey to find kindness and peace, have chosen the right place to start anew. Portugal, slow down to live longer. When they're young, Americans dream of New York to make it big. When they grow old, they dream of Portugal so they don't have to do anything at all. And if you've ever thought that retirement only revolves around clipping coupons, taking supplements, and watching financial news, then hello, welcome to Lisbon, where Americans in their golden years live slowly, live longer, and live enviably cheap. Many Americans have quietly abandoned their retirement plans in Florida, Arizona, or San Diego, not because those places lack sunshine, but because the bills there are hotter than the sun. Instead, they head for the cobblestone streets of Porto, the outdoor cafes of Lisbon, and the quaint apartments along the Algarve coast, where $1,500 a month doesn't force you to choose between buying medicine or having breakfast. From the place no one noticed to the place everyone's heading to, Portugal used to be on the fringes of the American imagination. Not as famous as Italy, not as wealthy as Germany, not as flashy as France. But it's exactly that quietness that became its charm. Like a small restaurant hidden in an alley without a sign, but always full because the food is good and the service is heartfelt. Here, Americans aren't treated like foreigners, but as guests who might just become neighbors. You won't need to show your insurance card every time you cough. You don't need a lawyer to get a haircut. And in the mornings, when you go to the market to buy oranges, the vendor will call you by name if you've been there 3 times. Linda's story, and thousands of other Lindas. Linda, 66, was once an elementary school teacher in Ohio. After her husband passed away, she realized her pension wasn't enough to maintain a decent life in the U.S. One day, she stumbled upon a YouTube video titled, "Retire in Portugal for less than $1,500 a month." 2 months later, she booked a flight. Now, Linda lives in Faro, a peaceful town in southern Portugal. She rents a small apartment near the sea, takes Portuguese classes for seniors, drinks coffee in the morning, strolls the beach in the afternoon, and FaceTimes her grandchild in the evening. She says, "I no longer feel like I'm just trying to exist. I'm truly living as my real self, no account numbers, no health insurance card." Retirement isn't the end, it's the beginning of something else. In the U.S., many retirees feel like they've been taken out of the game. In Portugal, retirement is a ticket to a different game, one where you're not measured by achievements, but by how you say good morning. Plenty of Americans come to Lisbon at first just to test it out, then end up staying 5 years, simply because here the elderly aren't seen as insurance burdens, but as a normal and respected part of society. People don't give up their seat for you at the supermarket because you're weak, but because they genuinely care. No one asks you, "Are you paying taxes?" They ask, "Are you happy?" No car, no credit card, no pressure. Do you know what it feels like to walk out of your house without carrying your wallet? In Lisbon, that happens more often than you'd think. Everything's nearby. The bakery, the fish market, the tram station, the street food stand. A lunch of grilled fish, fresh salad, a glass of wine, and a smile from the waiter costs about $8. And the magical part is, you don't even need to tip. Meanwhile, in major American cities, you might pay $18 for a plate of scrambled eggs and still feel like you're bothering someone if you ask for an extra napkin. What you gain isn't just money. It's time. Americans don't come to Portugal just to save money. They come to buy back time. No more weeks wedged between doctor's appointments, loan payments, and HOA meetings. Here, they can sit 3 hours in a cafe, and no one will ask, "Do you need anything else?" And when you live in a place where time isn't measured by clocks, but by heartbeats, birdsong, and smiles from strangers, you realize something you forgot after 40 years of working. Being busy isn't the same as being alive. So if you've ever thought that retirement is the final chapter of the journey, maybe you've never taken the right path. Because sometimes all you need is a one-way ticket to a place where life doesn't require you to prove anything, except that you're still smiling. And Portugal, quite coincidentally, is the place where smiles are always free. Thailand, where Americans relearn how to smile. Americans are known for their "have a nice day" smile, but few realize they've slowly forgotten how to smile without needing a reason. And there's a place that's teaching them that again, not through classes, not through guidebooks, but through glances, gestures, and gently spicy bowls of pho in the morning. That place is Thailand. From Bangkok to Chiang Mai, from Phuket to Krabi, Americans don't come here just to admire golden temples or bathe in turquoise seas. They come to live slowly, live cheaply, and most importantly, live genuinely. No pressure, no booking in advance, no need to explain their purpose in life. From a country once under travel advisories to a soul's retreat paradise. Not long ago, when Americans thought of Thailand, they thought of safety warnings, government travel alerts, and red flags on embassy websites. But then, people started filming TikToks in Chiang Rai, writing blogs about morning meditation in the jungles of Ubud, and posting pictures of floating markets, without any service charge receipts tagged with an extra 8% tax. And so, the stereotype began to crack. Gently. Amid all the noise about soaring costs in major American cities, Thailand waves from afar with a simple message. We don't have Disneyland, but we do have what you've forgotten. Sincere hospitality. A trip that doesn't want to return. Josh, 43 years old, was once a software engineer in Seattle. He decided to reset his life with a 2-week trip to Chiang Mai. 4 months later, he still hadn't booked a return flight. Here, I don't wake up to an alarm clock. I wake up to roosters crowing and the smell of curry. Josh isn't alone. American digital nomad communities are popping up across Pai, Koh Samui, and even Udon Thani, where you can join a Zoom meeting with clients in California while sipping fresh coconut juice for less than $1. Thailand is quietly becoming the unofficial choice for Americans who want to live, not just exist under the pressure of rent, insurance, interest rates, and a society they no longer fully trust. Safety isn't in cameras, but in eyes. In Thailand, you're not having your bag checked at every entrance like in New York, but you still feel safe, because people don't look at you as a foreign visitor under surveillance, but as someone they might offer directions to, invite for dessert, or simply smile at under a sudden rain. Security here isn't a network. It's a kind of trust that's never been signed in paperwork. And while many American tourists talk about the fear of being watched when walking at night back home in Chiang Mai, they ride scooters around the old town at 11 p.m., not because they have somewhere to go, but simply because they want to hear the quiet of the night. Food, kindness, and things not listed on any menu. In Thailand, you can walk into a street food stall, point at a random item on a sign written entirely in Thai, and the only thing you need to know is, even if you say nothing, the cook will smile as if you just ordered their favorite dish. No one waits for your tip. No one sighs if you don't order a second round. And if you return the next day, they still remember you. Not because you stood out, but because you smiled at them yesterday. How much is a smile worth? In Thailand, it's free. In America, you might spend thousands of dollars on retreat packages with meditation, detox, life coaching, and a little guidance, just to breathe. In Thailand, you can sit in front of a Buddha statue, take one deep breath, and let a stray cat curl up in your lap. And that's enough to reset your entire week. You don't need a lot of techniques, just enough stillness. And Thailand, a place long known for its quiet, is helping thousands of Americans rediscover a calm their homeland buried beneath hustle and speed. So if you see a random American in Bangkok, sitting at a small cafe with a soft smile and peaceful eyes, chances are that person skipped the return flight. Not because they're rejecting their country, but because they're learning how to love life, so that one day, when they return to the U.S., they'll bring back a Thai smile. Light, genuine, and without needing anyone to say, just do it. Croatia, gentle Europe. With prices America can't catch up to. If you ever thought vacationing on the Mediterranean was a privilege for CEOs, Hollywood stars, or at least someone who just won the Powerball, Croatia will make you check your bank account again, because it might be more doable than you think. You don't need to be a billionaire. You don't need business class. You just need a light suitcase, a bit of curiosity, and the courage to believe. There's another Europe, warmer, easier to live in, and one that doesn't demand a digital receipt when you order a meal. From old Eastern Europe to the new rising retreat paradise, Croatia used to be a blurry name on the European travel map. For Americans, it was a place they vaguely remembered from history books, related to war, the Balkans, or a football team that stirred up the 2018 World Cup. But now, Croatia is quietly capturing the hearts of Americans who once thought they'd only go to Italy once in their life. Because now, instead of squeezing through Venice for a €6 espresso, they can sip coffee by the ancient harbor of Split. No rush, no inflated prices, just sun, sea breeze, and cobblestones worn by centuries of footsteps. A simpler America. Across the ocean, Croatia feels like a lighter version of the U.S. No Walmart, but plenty of farmers' markets. No freeways, but scenic coastal roads straight out of a movie. And most importantly, there's no pressure to spend your way into happiness. Robert and Cynthia, a 58-year-old couple from Colorado, once thought they'd spend the rest of their lives in a suburb near Denver. But after comparing insurance premiums, rent, and living expenses, they joked, "We can live like royalty, or continue living like debtors." And so, Croatia called their name. They chose Zadar, a small coastal town where the ocean hums alongside wind chimes. And something magical happened. With just a fraction of what they spent in the U.S., they had a home by the sea, fresh organic food every day, and, for the first time in years, the feeling of not dreading the first of the month. Here, you're a tourist, but they call you friend. Croatia doesn't treat tourists like walking ATMs. The market vendors remember which olives you like. The cafe staff call you the morning coffee guy, no sugar. And after a few weeks, you don't feel like you're on vacation. You feel like you're actually living here. No credentials required. You don't need to say what you used to do, what degree you have, or what assets you own in America. You just need to know how to order seafood pasta, or not even that, the chef will pick for you. Peace isn't something you buy, it's something you feel. In the U.S., people often plan escapes from life in the form of 3,000 five-day vacations. In Croatia, many Americans have found the opposite. Life is the vacation. You can rent an apartment with a balcony overlooking the Adriatic, cook dinner with fresh seafood, drink local wine, and watch the sunset touch the sea. All for the price of one night in a mid-range hotel in Boston. There's no premium service, but there is a neighbor who brings over slices of cheese and asks, "Are you planning to stay a while?" There's no luxury living sign, but there's a wooden chair under an olive tree, where you can sit for 3 hours and no one will ask if you need anything else. And if you need one last message, try slowing down. Croatia doesn't promote itself loudly. It doesn't need to, because once you set foot here, you'll understand why more and more Americans, from retirees to freelancers, are choosing it as the place to begin a new chapter. No noise, no scrambling, no competition. Just the sound of waves, the scent of sea salt, street music, and a calm that makes you look inward and smile. The kind of smile that doesn't need a reason, like one American wrote in his journal after spending 3 months in Croatia. "Here, I no longer have to chase life. Life has already been waiting for me. Vietnam, where Americans find their breath again. No Whole Foods. No Starbucks on every corner. No self-checkout or 10-lane highways. But there's one thing Vietnam is offering thousands of Americans, something they once believed had vanished forever amidst packed schedules and endless Zoom meetings. The feeling of being alive among people. Sounds simple? For Americans, that's now a rare privilege. Not coming to travel, but to revive Carla, 64, a widow living in Pennsylvania, used to describe her retirement as a quiet, filled with noise. She had a pension, a home, insurance. But every day, she still felt like a number in the system, a person existing without any real connection to anything truly alive. Then one rainy afternoon, after reading a blog article titled Spiritual Retreats in Vietnam for Americans over 60, Carla booked a flight to Hue, a spontaneous decision, and also an unexpected turning point. After the first morning meditation in the courtyard of a small monastery, where the sound of wind chimes blended with the soft scent of incense, she burst into tears. Not out of sadness, but because, for the first time in years, she felt someone sincerely ask, "How are you feeling today?" And truly listen. Vietnam doesn't try to sell experiences. It gives them, in a deeply human way. You don't need to book a massage 3 weeks in advance. Don't need a membership card to enter a meditation center. And certainly don't need to purchase a $2,000 7-day soul recovery package. You just need to walk into a street-side eatery, where the owner asks if you want it spicy and sometimes adds an extra ladle of broth because it's chilly today. You just need to stroll slowly through Hoi An's ancient town at dusk, see the glowing lanterns, the elderly women folding cakes in front of their porches, and suddenly realize not everything needs to be sped up. Welcome to a culture without rush. In America, you can live in a crowded neighborhood and still feel lonely. In Vietnam, you can be a stranger, but after just a few days, at least 3 people will ask, "How long have you been here? Do you need any help?" The morning noodle vendor might tell you their son just got into college. The motorbike driver asks if you've eaten yet, then points you to a good restaurant without expecting a commission. Here, life isn't wrapped in bullet-pointed to-do lists. It flows naturally, like a soft melody without a conductor, yet everyone knows the tune. No AI, but warm eyes and real hands. You won't find customer service chatbots in places like Jalat or Hue. Instead, you'll find a woman in her 50s wearing a conical hat, bowing gently with a genuine, not programmed, smile. Americans, long used to a world where service is optimized by tech, feel grounded again after drifting in a cloud of data. In Vietnam, you don't need a new Wi-Fi password to connect. You just need to look someone in the eye and smile. Prices? Of course they're lower, but more important is the feeling of not being pushed to consume. A delicious full bowl of pho costs less than $2. A night in a riverside homestay is half the price of dinner at an Italian chain restaurant in Los Angeles. But what Americans remember most isn't the price. It's the feeling of not being priced. No one judges you for dressing simply. No one scans your bag with their eyes to assess your wallet. Here, your presence alone is enough to be welcomed. Vietnam, not a place to conquer, but a place to understand, and Americans, after years of living in a world where every minute must have a KPI, are slowly realizing there are places on Earth that don't require you to be brilliant, wealthy, or special. You just need to arrive with an open heart, and Vietnam will open the rest. As one American traveler wrote after 3 months in Hoi An, "I came here to relax, but in the end, I left with something no one advertised, a version of myself that was gentler, kinder, and more grateful." Not bad for a destination without Disneyland, right?